Hello again. If you remember last Sunday, Jesus came into Jerusalem with a big parade, and he did many things during that week, which I'm not going to tell you about, but you can have a look up in a Bible. But today I'm going to tell you about something which happened on the Thursday, a meal they had together. Again, it's taken from Bob Hartman, but this time from his Easter stories. This is in John chapter 13. Jesus and his friends went out for a meal. It was Passover, which was the time when they all remembered all the wonderful things that God had done for his people. How he had saved them from slavery long, long ago and led them to a land all of their own. They were sitting around a low table, waiting for the meal to begin. Everything smelt so good. The bread, the lamb, the sauces, everything except their feet. They had walked a long way in their sandals in the sun that day, and their feet were dirty and sweaty and stinky. Oh, what a smell! It smells around here, said one of Jesus' friends. Why don't you do something about it then? Said another of Jesus' friends. No, I can't do that. Washing feet's a servant's job. And then Jesus' friends all started arguing about who was the least important and therefore who would have to do this job. Then Jesus did something that no one expected. He took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he started to wash his friends' feet. No, 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 said Peter. He was very upset. That's a servant's job. You're our teacher and our master. You can't wash my feet. Jesus said, that's just the point. You're right. I am your teacher. And if I can wash your feet, then surely you can wash each other's feet. And we can all serve one another. No one more important than any of the others. So Jesus washed all their feet and they sat back down again. And everything smelt good. Absolutely everything. Jesus and his friends were now eating the Passover meal. They talked and they prayed and they remembered all the amazing things that God had done for his people. But Jesus was sad. I have something to tell you, he said. We all know that the religious leaders don't like me. They would do anything they could to stop me. And now it seems that one of you here has agreed to help them arrest me. Not me, said one of the disciples. Not me either, said another. And they all said this, but they were all wondering who it could be. The disciple next to Jesus whispered to him, Who is it, Jesus? It's the one I give this bread to, he said. And he dipped a piece of bread in the sauce, and he stretched over the table and handed it to Judas. Judas looked at Jesus, and he looked at all the friends around him. And then he got up and he left the room. Jesus spoke to the others. When I'm gone, I don't want you to forget me, he said. This is what I'd like you to do whenever you're gathered together. And he took a loaf and he gave thanks to God for it, and he broke it and he passed it around to share among his friends. And he said, "This is my body. I give it for you." And then he took a cup of wine, and he gave thanks for that too. And then he passed it round to share with his friends. And he said, "This is my blood, poured out for you." Then they sang a song to God to finish the meal, and they went for a walk. On the way, Jesus looked sadder still. "The religious authorities are going to come for me tonight," the religious leaders. "And though you're my friends, you're all going to run away." "No, no, no," said Peter. "I would never do that." Jesus said, "Peter, my dear friend Peter, it will be worse for you. Before the night's out, before the cock crows to welcome the dawn, you will deny that you even know me. Not once, not twice, but 3 times." "No, no, no," said Peter. "Not me. I would never do that." And all the other friends said the same. But Jesus just walked quietly on to a garden they all knew, in a place called Gethsemane. Peter was sleepy, very sleepy. Maybe it was because of the special food he'd just eaten, or maybe because of the wine he'd drunk, or maybe because of the walk to the Garden of Gethsemane, or maybe just because it was very late at night. When they arrived, Jesus said, "I'm going off to pray now. Peter, James, and John, I want you to come with me to pray for me, to help me." So Peter, James, and John and Jesus walked off together in silence. After a minute or two, Jesus stopped them. "Wait here," he said. "I'm going to pray over there, but I want you to stay awake and watch and pray with me. I need your help." So Jesus walked off a little way and started to pray. "Loving Lord Father God, I know I must die tomorrow. I know this is to take away all the bad things that anyone has ever done. But if there's any possible way to do this without all the suffering and pain, please show me now." Peter wanted to pray too, but Peter was sleepy, very sleepy, and every time he closed his eyes to pray, he found himself dropping off to sleep. Suddenly, someone was shaking him awake. It was Jesus. "Peter, wake up. I asked you to pray for me. I need you. I need your help now. Please stay awake." And Jesus walked off again to pray. Peter wanted to pray, he really did, but he was sleepy, very sleepy. And before long, he'd nodded off again. Jesus prayed and came back 3 times, and every time he found them asleep. When he came back the 3rd time, suddenly they woke up. Peter realized that Judas was in the garden, and he wasn't alone. He was with a band of men, the religious leaders and servants, with torches and clubs and swords. Judas walked up to Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "hello." And he walked up and he kissed Jesus on the cheek, just like Everyone did in Israel with their friends at that time. Just like Judas always did with Jesus. Just like Judas was still a friend of Jesus. But this wasn't a friendly kiss. Not at all. It was a signal to all the armed men with him to show them which man they needed to arrest. And they did. The men with swords and clubs grabbed Jesus. Now Peter was awake, wide awake, and he grabbed a sword and whirled it round. But all he managed to do was chop off the ear of one of the high priest's servants. "Stop," said Jesus. "Stop now. This is not the way. If God wanted to rescue me, he could. But God's plan is for me to go with these men, and that's what I'm going to do." So he reached out and touched the high priest's ear and healed it. And then he went with the men. And what about Jesus' friends? Well, they all ran off, except Peter. Peter followed at a distance, following Jesus and the band of men. He was half asleep, half awake, wishing this was a dream and that he'd wake up. And little knowing the nightmare it was about to become. Peter was worried, very worried. They had arrested Jesus and taken him to the high priest's house. And Peter didn't know what they were going to do with him. But Peter was loyal, very loyal. The rest of Jesus' friends had all run off, but he had followed at a distance. And now he was standing in the high priest's courtyard. It was late at night. In fact, it was so late at night, it was now, in fact, early morning, just before the dawn. And Peter was cold, very cold. And so he huddled round a fire with the rest of the high priest's servants. And that was his mistake. "Hey, you," said one of the high priest's servants. "I know you. You're one of Jesus' friends," she said. Now Peter was frightened, very frightened. And almost without thinking, he blurted out, "Oh no, you got me confused with someone else. I don't know him." And he wandered off to stand by the gates. And there he was safe, very safe. Or so he thought. The servants round the fire kept looking his direction, and eventually another servant girl wandered over. "I think my friend's right. I've seen you with Jesus." Peter was panicking now, really panicking. "No, no, no, not me. I don't know him. Why don't you leave me alone?" And another servant said, "Ah, that's that northern accent from Galilee. You've got the same accent that Jesus had. You must be one of his friends." Now Peter was panicking, frightened and confused. "No, not me. I never known the man. I never been with him. I don't know him at all." And then all of a sudden, in the distance, a cockerel crowed. And Peter remembered. He remembered the special meal where afterwards Jesus had said that Peter would deny 3 times that he knew him before the cockerel crowed. And Peter was sad, very sad. And while the servants pointed at him and shouted at him, he ran off crying. And Jesus was now completely alone.